Let's get ready to rumble!
Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 190 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and MyMMANews.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, I saw the trailer for the new UFC game, and it has Bruce Lee as a pre-order character.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's cool, but it's kind of like Michael Jordan in NBA Live. You can't rate him if you rate Bruce Lee a 70 on the ground, there's going to be a huge problem with that. And then on the feet, he has to be 99. Just unless I don't know, you're somehow pull off a miracle. How is it possible for Clay Guida to beat Bruce Lee or anybody? Even Anthony Pettis, this seems ridiculous. When you play the games, I don't know, but it seems pretty cool. It might make me eventually buy a new console. We'll have to wait and see, but the game looks pretty sweet. On today's show, we're going to review UFC Fight Night 40. We're going to preview what's left of the Bellator pay-per-view. Jorge went to the Jackson's MMA Series Protégés show. And we're going to preview Juan Manuel Marquez against Mike Alvarado, I think early candidate for Fight of the Year. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But as always, you can get in touch with the show through several options, through Facebook, Twitter, and through email, lowblow505. Also, we're available on YouTube, youtube.com/lowblow505. Also, we're available on Twitter at The Low Blow, and we're, of course, available through all forms of audio listening, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatic. All those have mobile apps for you to listen to. So, man, I guess let's get into the shortened news package here. And really, just another bizarre story. In terms of Bellator, we all know about Eddie Alvarez falling out of the bout against Michael Chandler. It'll be Will Brooks. You've been a big fan of his, Jorge. He's going to be facing Michael Chandler this weekend. I don't know if that's going to be the main event of the show. I doubt it. But pretty much, Eddie Alvarez didn't have too many nice things to say about this new bout. To Twitter to apologize. Here's his quote. He was on the MMA Hour when he called it a, SH blank TY belt. Here's what he said on his Twitter. I apologize to Bellator MMA. My comments yesterday about the interim bout, you guys have been supportive throughout. My reaction was out of line. And to me, I don't know, Jorge, because I still don't get why Eddie Alvarez ultimately is with this promotion. It just seems like he's just unhappy with Bellator. 90% of the information we hear from Eddie Alvarez when he's dealing with Bellator is negative. He's kind of like the Diaz brothers of Bellator in terms of kind of their frosty relationship. So, I guess, what's, besides, the litigation in terms of, Bellator keeping him out of action, what's his true motivation to really stay in there? Wouldn't the UFC be the best option, even though it'd be less money? Why is he truly in this organization in the first place? I don't really understand.
It might be an ego kind of thing. He likes to see himself as one of the top of the guys, and because, I don't exactly know, but this is just what I would think. It's looking on the outside in, is he wants to feel like a top dog. Now, if he goes over to the UFC, he's going to get caught in the shuffle because any guys in the top 5 can potentially give him a pretty good loss on his record. Now, the top 5 guys in the UFC. So, he's just in a really tough situation with Bellator. The promotion ain't the best. The people aren't going to consider him the best in that weight class until he actually fights, more than one formidable opponent, and that would obviously be to cross over to the UFC.
Yeah, it's just so weird because
it is.
All the information is it's so negative, and he just seems unhappy. And honestly, they've tried to put this fight together on pay-per-view a couple of times already, and it hasn't happened. It's just unfortunate. Hopefully, pay-per-view does equal a payday, so ultimately you hope he gets paid, but I don't know how long he's going to be out with his injury for. Hopefully, in MMA, man, anything can happen. Will Brooks, I think Michael Chandler's the favorite. He should be, but Will Brooks is not insane for him to win. This is mixed martial arts, so if he beats Michael Chandler, that rematch is over. So this is a very risky move for Bellator, I think.
No, I completely agree with you as well. It's a shame that this event took such a hit just because we were so pumped for it. Like, I was even considering buying the pay-per-view, especially it's rare for me to do that with promotions that aren't major boxing event or outside of that. So it's very disappointing, and it just, makes it's unfortunate, but it just makes Bellator seem, kind of like a joke. Hey, one fight crashed your entire card, and that's really unfortunate, especially when you want another promotion to be validated and with their two best fighters also. So it's a shame. But what I guess wasn't really a shame in boxing news, I guess it was expected. Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley, their rematch, their pay-per-view numbers finally came in. To me, Jay, it's unbelievable how long it actually takes to count up these pay-per-view numbers. It's sure. 2014. Why is it that we have to wait 3 weeks to know how many pay-per-views were purchased? Even, on a regular day, let's say an average Joe could count up to, I'd wish him luck, but to count up to 800,000 in 1 day or 2 days, I mean, come on, it's easy to do. But Pacquiao, Bradley, too, did between 750 to 800,000 buys. Bob Arum, the CEO of Top Rank, the promoter, admits that he was disappointed, and they felt there was a little bit more of a buzz after this fight for a third fight between the two guys. And of course, the fight took place on April 12th. We remember leading up to the event that Bob Arum was upset about all the Floyd Mayweather, Marcos Maidana posters that were around the casino, but posters at a casino don't affect pay-per-view buys for people that aren't in Las Vegas. So this event does 750,000, 800,000. I mean, UFC would, be extremely happy with those numbers. But when it comes to Manny Pacquiao, who's supposed to be the second biggest cash cow in the game after Floyd Mayweather, I think these numbers are sort of disappointing, and really don't show how much of an impact Bradley had on this fight. Just because Manny Pacquiao fighting anyone would probably do 700,000. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know why he's tripping. I mean, these are great numbers. I mean, Timothy Bradley, again, we talk about casual fans, and the casual fans' eyes, he's the guy that was boring against Manny Pacquiao to get an unfair decision. And so when you do the rematch, when you hear, in boxing circles, when you have your one boxing friend, you have casual fans that might see the commercial on television, and they said the first fight was boring. Are you going to want to buy it on pay-per-view? They're probably going to say no. The numbers are going to go down. And also keep in mind, Pacquiao has lost. He got knocked out cold by Juan Manuel Marquez. I can't say his name today, but Marquez knocked him out cold. So that takes away the luster. Now it's kind of like, what's the big? You know how boxing is, man. People have this thing in mind. You lose one time in boxing, it's over. Even though Manny Pacquiao has several losses, I think he's kind of, ever since his hot streak, he's been perceived as kind of undefeated. So when he got knocked out brutally by Marquez, it was kind of like, okay, why am I going to watch this guy on pay-per-view again? He lost to Marquez. The Mayweather bouts off. I don't really care. But with these numbers, they're still pretty good. So, I don't know. I think, maybe Arum needs to get used to a new phase of Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view numbers. But I think these numbers are pretty solid for considering the main event and all the circumstances surrounding it, I think.
These numbers are going to dwindle, Jay. 700,000 is going to be good. Within 5 years, 700,000 are going to be great numbers for boxing pay-per-views as Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather make their way out. Boxing really does not have the next huge pay-per-view star, with the exception of Canelo, of course. But unless Canelo receives opponents that are tough, man. Let's say, for instance, this Alvarez and Erislandy Lara match that's coming up. I think that'll do about 600,000 pay-per-view buys. I'll be surprised if it does these type of numbers, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult. Even with the UFC, they're struggling for stars. This is. We have to. We're hardcore fans. We love the fight sports. We have to realize it's a niche. It's not the NBA or football. If me and you wear a Pacquiao shirt, if I walk into a Subway and I wear a Pacquiao shirt, no one's going to really say anything to me most of the time. But I walked into Subway and I was wearing my 49ers shirt, and the person chatted me about the 49ers. It's everywhere. Everywhere you go, the NFL is king. It's super popular. If you're wearing any kind of NFL apparel, somebody's going to usually say something to you. If you're wearing a fight shirt, I mean, it could be Mike Tyson, whoever, Canelo. I mean, any kind of superstar, UFC. No one's really going to say anything to you. It's a niche part of the sports landscape, and I think fans are going to have to start getting realized until there's a new transcendent superstar in one of these two sports. So yeah, I think the numbers, the baseline for really doing well is going to be 700,000, and I don't think that's a negative. I don't really. I mean, to me, I want to ask you, Jorge. Mayweather just fought. I mean, what are your predictions on his numbers? I mean, really, the Donald Sterling thing happened while that whole pay-per-view was going. In terms of hype, how do you think the numbers were? Do you think could it be possible that these numbers were under 1 million, kind of similarly to the Robert Guerrero?
Ooh, I feel that it'll be close. I think that because people didn't know what to expect out of Maidana. I think. Yeah. Over 1 million is a possible. I'm going to go ahead and do 1.1 million for that fight.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty good too. Maidana's a virtual unknown.
Yep.
In casual fans' eyes, I think that those are solid numbers. So I don't know. I think people. UFC is the same thing that happens. I believe there's some other numbers that they call a disappointment, and it's just kind of ridiculous. Let's move on real quickly. Some short news. Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen approved for Nevada fighting licenses. Both these guys were off TRT after it was banned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Both were licensed by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. This is news, in terms of both these guys being licensed to compete in Nevada. UFC 173 is coming up, and then you have Sonnen fighting in July. But I want to ask you, and this is something we haven't really discussed, and something I should have kind of found out this guy's name. Let me look for it real quick. But Nevada has a new commissioner of its commission, and really there's been rumors, and not rumors, but there's been discussion of this guy not really having a mixed martial arts background, pretty much only kind of being in the boxing world. Does that kind of concern you? Or is that kind of, the MMA fans being kind of overly sensitive? I mean, mostly we've heard this guy has a boxing background, is not really familiar with MMA. Does that concern you in terms of making decisions in terms of, okay, this guy's on TRT or any kind of performance-enhancing drug, or there's a rules change or something controversial happens, suspensions, politics with Dana White. What's your opinion on this new commissioner?
I don't think so because, I might be completely off base here, but did Keith Kaiser, the previous, executive director here, did he have a background in any of that? So I think... I think
he was a lawyer.
Yeah, at least with boxing, the guy understands how the fight game at least works. And, with MMA, it's not the same exact thing, meaning... and I don't mean the actual art itself. I mean what happens in the background. It's pretty similar the way everything operates. So for MMA fans, I think they're just being overly sensitive when it comes to this.
Yeah, his name's Robert Bennett. He was a former FBI agent, and he's a current boxing judge. So I think it's interesting. We'll have to wait and see. It's period. I saw Dana White on the media scrum. He seemed very pleased. He had a meeting with him, so hopefully things are going in the right direction. Dana White's not really shy about expressing his feelings, like with the athletic commissions, if he's angry about it. 2 rounds, man. Anything that's kind of bothering you, or has you kind of piqued your interest in the combat sports world? It's kind of somewhat of a slow week.
Yeah, one thing specifically, I think, and this is kind of news as well, is the successful boxing promotion in Phoenix, Arizona, Iron Boy, is actually making its way out of Arizona. They're moving on to, not moving on, they're making a stop in El Paso, Texas here the day before the UFC actually hits Albuquerque, so it's another pretty decent event. They got a lot of young up-and-coming fighters on the card, a few Albuquerque guys on the card, and one debut that I think a lot of people in southern New Mexico are excited about. Ayanna Vasquez, who's arguably the greatest amateur fighter in the state of New Mexico's history just because of how decorated she is in the female divisions, would always come up short, though, in a lot of the major championships to Christina Cruz out of New York, who is one hell of a fighter. But Ayanna Vasquez, nonetheless, has been all over the world competing, winning medals. She's finally going pro in this event. So people are really excited about that event. You got guys like David Benavides, Jose Benavides Jr.'s younger brother. He went pro at 16. We actually had him as a guest a few months back. when he was going to have his second fight. So David Benavidez will be on that. Other guys from Las Cruces like Cesar Shabazz. So a lot of good guys on this card that young up-and-coming fighters to look at. I saw, and I'll be posting this shortly, a draft of what the fight card looks like, and they're all competitive fights with guys that are 4-0, 6-1, 5-1, going up against each other. So there's no cupcake fights, and it could be one hell of a card. I'm thinking of even making my way down there the day before the UFC event here.
What are the chances, and what's the feeling if they do a show here in New Mexico? Is that really, because really there's no promotion that's stuck a claim to Albuquerque or New Mexico boxing. There's not, like, compared to MMA with the Jackson's MMA series, there's not really that homegrown promotion that's putting on cards every month besides, Lenny Fresquez. Now usually it's surrounding Holly Holm whenever she's doing. It's not dedicated to growing the sport of boxing specifically here in New Mexico. So what are the chances of Arum Boy, crossing over and having cards here? It seems like they got their act together, the production value. I know you went to a show a couple of years ago, Jorge. It seems like to me this market's ripe for the taking.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Especially, I think what they're going to focus on first is that southern New Mexico, West Texas site, just because a lot of the fighters that they've already had on the Phoenix cards have been from Las Cruces or have been from El Paso. So I think little by little they're going to try to do that area and then eventually move their way up. They will have, I think, a handful of events for the rest of the year. So they're staying busy, Jay. They expect, besides this event, I think they're expecting 5 more events to take place before the year ends. And that's extraordinary for a local boxing promotion. So 2 will be in in Texas. I think the other might be in El Paso. That's something I'm going to confirm with them. And the other 3 will likely be there in Phoenix, Arizona again. So if there is ultimately a New Mexico show, it'll be in 2015. But as many shows as Iron Boy is putting on, don't be surprised if they do eventually make it here. And if they put decent guys on the card, an event with 1,500, 2,000 people is a strong success for them because that's what they're used to filling in the celebrity theater there in Phoenix, Arizona.
Let's see. This is my thing, and I guess this kind of can go into the topic we'll be discussing next later on with UFC Fight Night 40. But to me, this Matt Brown, and I don't know, I was kind of looking for topics to discuss, and I think I got to give props to Matt Brown because I keep writing this guy off every time, and he keeps winning. And I think, we need to consider this guy as at least a contender in our welterweight division. I do believe that someday he's going to get beat by somebody better than him, as we saw in this really a war between him and Eric Silva, a classic. He got caught several times and almost was finished. But he somehow has resiliency and comes back and wins. And to me, I really think this is could be the breakout star of 2014. I know that seems kind of ridiculous in terms of this guy's already had a winning streak and he's kind of already got on the radar of MMA fans, but I'm talking about casual fans that are on Fox. I mean, Matt Brown still, to me, needs to fight somebody in the top 10. The welterweight division's loaded. There's guys waiting in the wings for title shots. Personally, I think you can melt this guy on Fox Sports. They've been looking for a kind of superstar to put on these Fox network cards. Matt Brown's the perfect fighter. He's entertaining. Usually he's going to get hurt, and he comes back and he wins. I think he's a fantastic fighter to put on. I think the only thing that concerns me is that, we've seen fighters before, Jorge, who are fantastic, entertaining fighters, and then they fight that contender, and then they freak out, and they fight a different way, and they lose. And they usually get embarrassed, or the fight's boring, and it really hurts them. So, hopefully for Matt Brown, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hopefully he kind of sticks with it. But I think he's already had my respect. How can you not? He's an incredible fighter, lots of toughness. But now, I think you got to consider this guy, easily a contender for the title. Philippou, not so much, but we'll talk about that later. But props to him for beating Lawrence Larkin. But anyway, definitely props to Matt Brown. Before we get to UFC Fight Night 40 and kind of previewing the action this weekend, I want to get your thoughts on the Jackson's MMA series, Protégés series. I saw your pictures, man. You're right. The production seems spectacular. How was the attendance? How was the atmosphere? I know it's been kind of cold here in Albuquerque. I don't know what's going on with this weather, but how was it attending that show?
It was a decent atmosphere, meaning the weather. The environment was pretty decent for. It wasn't too cold in there, so just to be in an old, I guess, train station, it was more like a blacksmith shop where trains would come and get hung there in the building itself. So, of course,
Sure.
It was going to hold all this production, lighting, and it just blows my mind how good production can be for an amateur event like this. It just goes to show how well Jackson's has improved over the years, or it's not even an improvement. It's what we're used to seeing from them. Great events with great production. So the amount of people that were actually there, you asked, they expected about 1,000. I think we saw about between 850 to maybe 900. I think more toward the mid 800s. However, which is still a decent crowd. Tickets were between $35 to $75. Again, that's for an amateur event, so it's a little. Yeah. It's people would think it's a little pricey, but I mean the entertainment value, along with the production and just the feeling that you had in there of nostalgia, it just felt like the building was right for the fight. I don't know if you saw my tweets, but during the second fight, actually, a train pulled alongside of the venue and from a few feet from hundreds of yards out started blowing its whistle extremely loud. While the guys were fighting, the conductor actually pulled the train aside next to the venue, and him and his crew got out to watch a few fights. So that was awesome. Just an incredible and just unique feeling of actually being there. It's not something that we're accustomed to seeing here. I'm just glad that area around downtown, Jay, is becoming just this unique area of where people can go to experience different things now. It's not just a place that people are staying away from. So events like this, despite the fact that it's fighting, the production value is a value, a level. So as long as events like this continue to happen there within the downtown area, I mean, MMA is here to stay for a long time in this city, I think.
Yeah, and I agree. And really, I mean, I hate, again, to bring in the pro wrestling, and even in boxing, really, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Jorge, but there hasn't been a place, maybe Route 66 Casino is the closest location where it's one arena, one venue where there's always fights consistently every month. And that's something I think that's lacking here in terms, there's Tingley in terms of Jackson's MMA series, but it's kind of, maybe a show every couple of months, Holly Holmes sporadic at the Route 66 Casino. All these venues are kind of sporadic. So maybe this rail yards, I mean, hopefully we can see something every month, whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA, and it can just be a home for classic fights, because we've seen that easily in pro wrestling, just small venues where these small promotions, it would grow from 500 people to 1,000 to capacity every month. You're running shows consistently. So hopefully this becomes a trend and we see shows there every month. I think it'd be fantastic for the community, and I think it'd be really cool. I think the price tag, if you build a solid consistency of having shows every month, I think even though the prices are a little bit high, I think eventually that might not matter if you're running shows every month and you're having consistently good cards. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I hope they keep running shows. Did you happen to hear if they're going to be back there, a future date? Was there any kind of future plans discussed at all?
They're hoping to do another event sometime in October. It wasn't clear if it was a professional bout or if it was going to be another amateur event. I would love to see a professional bout there just because I think they could do some really good numbers. The seating wasn't what I expected. It was actually leveled, seats all the way to the end. But nonetheless, it was a good seat wherever you saw, just because you were leveled and the venue was so, I guess, not necessarily tight, but it's perfectly
intimate.
It was intimate. That's what I should say. And the cage was perfectly placed in between. It was equidistant no matter which side that you sat on. So I think whether it be another amateur event, I think it would be very successful. But if they did a pro event, it might not be They might do 1,500, 2,000 if it were a pro event. So just very interesting to see that venue, what that venue does become. The general manager of Jackson's, Ricky Kahn, said he did mention that it was a pretty pricey event to put together, but he did have some big sponsors like Patron and Tecate that did help back the event. So a pro event, I think, would just bring those types of promoters in, a little bit more.
I hope so. And it's kind of a bummer we have to wait till October. Hopefully, he can maybe think of another event. We only got 15 minutes remaining, so I want to break down this UFC Fight Night card real quickly. Fight Night 40 from the U.S. Bank Arena from Cincinnati, Ohio. A pretty entertaining event. Lots of quick finishes, lots of upsets. We got to talk about the Neil Magny Tim Means fight. Joe Rogan was doing a kind of I don't know what you would call it, like a podcast while the fights were going on. I think it was him, Brendan Schaub, and 2 other comedians. It was pretty entertaining, even though the fights have been over for a week now. I recommend going and checking it out, Joe Rogan's podcast. But he mentioned, you can talk about this fight, Jorge, with Neil Magny. He's kind of a point fighter. He kind of doesn't really punch with power. He just kind of punches just to score points, and that's why his conditioning is so good, because he's not putting everything into his strikes. What went wrong for Tim Means here? 29-28, 29-28, 30-27, all for Neil Magny. What was Tim Means' struggles here in his fight against Magny?
Now, this specific fight, this one was one of the ones I missed, Jay. So
okay, me too.
With Neil,
yes.
With Neil, I've seen before, and what you said is exactly right. Just doesn't necessarily have to punch, but ultimately,
Sure.
from what I understood, it was a lot of groundwork that that Means was being outpointed on. And that's what we've seen in the UFC. Means not necessarily struggle on the ground, but he spent a lot of time there in his losses. So it might be something that he fixes on. And I'm not sure, or if you've heard, if he has any other, how long he's contracted. Was this just a kind of one and done kind of deal with the UFC? Because I know he was with Legacy for a while. We all know that here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it's really just performance. This could easily see him on the chopping block. I think, here's quotes from Neil Magny. I feel like the fight went well. It didn't go according to plan. His range and his build were a little different. Had to adjust during the fight. Magny has won 2 in a row in the UFC. Means snapped his 2-fight winning streak. I expect they give Tim Means another shot. He's that talented. And I don't get the impression from listening to the podcast the fight was boring. So I'd be shocked that they just cut him here. But you know how the UFC is, man. They're kind of cutting guys, one fight, they're not that impressive. So, they got a bloated roster. They need guys like Tim Means who's real talented. But this loss is going to hurt him, no doubt. This is a unanimous decision defeat for him pretty cleanly. This is going to hurt him. I don't think he'll get cut, but certainly in terms of his rankings in the UFC, this is going to damage him big time. How about Daron Cruickshank, man? Another guy we've been kind of sleeping on, but knocked out Eric Koch with a high kick. Again, Joe Rogan's podcast flipped out when that happened. Daron Cruickshank, man, you got to consider him. He was on The Ultimate Fighter. He's a guy, you know how it is now with The Ultimate Fighter, man. No one takes that show too seriously, but this guy's for real. He's won 2 in a row. He has 2 spectacular knockouts.
That's what I was going to say, 2 back-to-back knockouts. But you know what's hurting him a little bit is the 2 losses that he actually had with the UFC. But if he continues to knock people the hell out with some crazy kicks, man, he's going to become one of the more exciting fighters in the division. And I don't think he's in danger of getting cut. Let's say he loses 2 more. I think he's the type of fighter that, as long as he puts these exciting finishes on, he might stay with the UFC for a while. And let's not get it twisted either. He's not a guy that's like 10-6 or something like that. He's got a pretty good record. So for him to continue, on these crazy knockouts that he's had, then did he win knockout of the night? I hope he did.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think he got the knockout of the night bonus from what I heard.
Okay, because I just want to make sure with that, he did get it, just because it was a hell of a freaking move, man.
It was spectacular. You got Constantinos Philippou knocking out Lorenz Larkin. Knocking him out. I guess impressive. I'm not really thrilled about this guy, to be honest. but a solid fighter nevertheless. They mentioned again on the podcast that Lorenz Larkin defeated Robbie Lawler in Strikeforce. I mean, that's unbelievable if you think about it, especially how Robbie Lawler is doing now. But good win for Philippou. Certainly keeps him relevant, and I'm sure he'll get a pretty decent matchup in his next fight against somebody in the top 10. Nice to see him get the knockout here. Hopefully he continues to be aggressive, but we'll have to wait.
And Jay, one more thing before we get to discuss the main event, which was crazy, one of the best fights of the year, if you ask me. But I think the UFC got rid of their knockouts of the night, didn't they? Am I mistaken?
No, they do performance bonuses, so they're all 50,000.
Yeah, so fight of the night and performance of the night, right?
Something like that. I think, but I mean, there are 3 bonuses. They're just renaming them. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know why they did that. I mean, it's you name it, clown bonus or exciting bonus or whatever.
I think it's a PR.
Keeping me awake bonus.
I think it's a PR move, to be honest, because if they're paying these guys just to knock the hell out, it seems, if you think about it from the conservative fight fans' point of view, why are you awarding these guys to just savagely knock out the other one? I think it's similar to, I don't know why this came to my mind, but ESPN used to do what was it? Their Monday Night Crew used to do this dude got jacked up, or what was it?
Yeah.
Where the guy,
something like that.
The guy would just get leveled out. Now they stopped doing that because of how serious the concussion issue was. So for that, I think it was a PR move for UFC to get rid of that. Now,
could have been.
Back to the main event.
Sure, yeah, go ahead. I mean, this was a spectacular fight. Fight of the Year candidate Matt Brown wins. Eric Silva loses another crushing defeat. What do you think of Eric Silva's performance? We had talked about Matt Brown earlier, but how about Eric Silva here? Again, you take a look with Eric Silva, a lot of potential. A lot of people saying that he's going to be the next kind of welterweight champion on the rise here. But yeah, you take a look at John Fitch, he had him pretty hurt. And then he loses to Dong Young Kim and then loses to Matt Brown. So 3 welterweight contenders here. And really, you take a look at his record. You think about it.
4-4.
Yeah, I mean, the best guys beat was Charlie Brenneman. I mean, really, in terms of this guy being a contender, I don't think he is.
No, I think his contender years, I think, are, if they come, they won't come for another 2 or 3 years, to be honest. He's going to have to put up one hell of a winning streak if he ever wants to fight for the title, just because a 4-4 record. And, he did lose to some tough guys. His first loss with the UFC was a disqualification. He fought John Fitch, Dong Young Kim, and then Matt Brown. Those are no slouches to lose to either, but it's just unfortunate that he lost to some of the guys. They're not the elite guys in the division, but they are I disagree. Matt Brown, likely, one of the elite. Dong Young Kim, he's no slouch himself, but you're not fighting, the top 4 guys in that division to be considered, okay, this guy's 4-4. Should we give him the benefit of the doubt? He's borderline, another 2 losses in his next 3 fights. I think he's cut by the UFC, man.
Yeah, I agree. But you take a look at the bonuses. I mean, he has 5 bonuses. Fight of the night 2 times, submission of the night 2 times, and, 1 performance of the night bonus. So the guy is entertaining. He's kind of like Clay Guida and, Leonard Garcia. As long as he's entertaining and putting on exciting performances, it's really difficult to cut him. As long as he kind of keeps winning, loses 1, wins 1, loses 1, wins 1, and keeps getting the bonuses, it's almost virtually impossible to cut him. I mean, as long as you just kind of cut his salary when you renegotiate for a new contract. As we talked about with Matt Brown, impressive victory. Do you think, the matchup between Carlos Condit and Matt Brown was originally supposed to be made, but Matt Brown got hurt? Now Carlos Condit's injured on the shelf. If we see Matt Brown, I don't think he's getting a title shot this year. Let's say he wins 2 more fights. So let's say, he goes 2-1 the rest of the way. Do you think Carlos Condit is another good opponent? Or do you think that, Matt Brown's a little bit too tough for Carlos Condit? You maybe match Carlos with somebody kind of lower on the rankings first. I mean, where do you see Matt Brown going in the next year or 2?
Oh, man, this is tough. Matt Brown's teetering top 5 right now. I don't think he's one of the top 5 competitors just yet, but It's very difficult to gauge what could happen. It's just Carlos Condit. You don't want to put him in too tough of a fight, but they were supposed to fight. And if Carlos Condit wants to be back in line and he wants to fight the tough guys, this fight is going to eventually have to happen. You rarely see middle of the pack guys fight someone from the lower range. Obviously, Condit is not one of the middle range guys. He's in the top 3 or 4 in this division, meaning, of course, contenders for the title. I think it'd be too tough of a fight for Carlos Condit to come back. I think Matt Brown can easily come back to the cage, fight one of the guys, and being, and be one of the next in line to eventually fight for the title. I think 2 or 3 fights, if he pulls them off, he'll be fighting for a championship.
Agreed. And I think another great card for the UFC. They've been on a roll with some pretty good fight cards here. I don't know about the next pay-per-view.
What about the winner? Is this a stupid, I guess, suggestion? The winner of McDonald and Woodley, or should the winner of McDonald and Woodley get the next title shot?
I think that's the person that's going to get the next title shot. I know Robbie Lawler's in action against Jake Ellenberger. I think that might be a better fight because both those guys are battle-tested. Have the winner fight. Lawler, again, and Ellenberger versus Matt Brown. I think that might be better. But certainly, if they go in the, take the loser, of Woodley and Rory McDonald, I wouldn't be opposed to that. So there's several ways you can go where I don't think it's a wrong decision to make.
What about this one? I think I love the possibility of this fight, a rematch. There was a split decision between Dong Young Kim and Matt Brown back in 2008.
It's a great fight.
I would love to see that rematch just because that was a split decision. It was a pretty decent fight, so I would love to see that rematch. I think that's a really good fight to make between those two guys.
The only negative is that they might put that fight in Asia where no one's going to see it. So I think as long as it's in the western side of the globe where they can get exposure instead of on Fight Pass at 4 o'clock in the morning, I think that'd be better. Real quickly, Bellator 120, we talked about it earlier. First pay-per-view for Bellator. It's Rampage, King Mo as the main event. Tito Ortiz fighting Alexander Shlemenko. Will Brooks fighting Michael Chandler for the lightweight title. I guess minimal interest for this fight. I don't know. I was going to buy the show. I was really going to get the show.
Are you no longer going with it?
I'm not. No, I'm going to watch some indie wrestling and watch the boxing match on HBO with Marquez, and Mike Alvarado. I don't really care anymore, to be honest. Quentin Jackson, King Mo, I don't know. I'm not really into that fight. What do you think, Jorge? Are you any more excited than this than I am?
Oh, no way, man. It's just very difficult. It'd be, I've been a big fan of Will Brooks, but I just think he's not ready for a title fight just yet.
No.
And
not against Michael Chandler.
Not against Michael Chandler, I agree. The odds started at Michael Chandler as a 10-1 favorite. He's still a 10-1 favorite in some of the sports book, and Will Brooks is the highest 7-1 underdog, man. So it's Vegas does not see Will Brooks winning this contest. Alexander versus Tito, that's an interesting fight. I think Tito's a pretty big underdog in that fight, but he might surprise us. And if he does win that, it's going to turn a lot of heads. But it's just, when WWF was struggling for a little bit and they had a lot of old fighters, or a lot of old wrestlers, I should say, this is what this kind of seems like. You just throw some of these old guys against some of these new blood is what this kind of feels like. So the main event now, Chemo and Quentin, okay, that should be a competitive contest, but is it going to make me want to buy a pay-per-view? Absolutely not, man.
Well, you make the pro wrestling comparison, so I'll walk through the door here. I think you compare, early, to refer to the early 90s, right?
Yes.
So, a lot of the guys from WWF at the time went to WCW because of the big money contracts. So in wrestling, that's the beauty of pro wrestling, and this is why it makes pro wrestling so difficult to watch. You can rig the outcome as the way you like it. You can build guys in any way you want to. So they build Bret Hart, they build Shawn Michaels, they build Diesel, they build new stars, Razor Ramon, etc., where, they build a lot of new guys for the future. So it built, then starting in 96, 97, it was Stone Cold Rock and so on. And WCW, meanwhile, was paying all these old guys all this money, but eventually it was the same angles and they were kind of going to the well too often, and WWF took the advantage. In MMA, you can't rig the outcome the way you like it. You have to have legitimate fights. And when one promotion has all the talent, it's difficult to create your own kind of, unique bubble within itself. Like I think WEC and really Strikeforce were the last two organizations to kind of create its own existence, in having successful shows and value that people wanted to see. I mean, with Strikeforce, still there was plenty of free agents that were in the top 10 that MMA fans wanted to see. And not only that, is that with Bellator, man, they're running these cards every week. And so you watch these cards and you think they're skippable. It's like, okay, Bellator 121, I don't really care about the show, It's like you don't get, it's this oversaturation. We talked about with the UFC. I mean, it's even more with Bellator, where we see these guys all the time, and it doesn't feel special. Where compared to the WEC, man, you remember, Jorge, WEC every couple of months, you couldn't wait for those shows, stacked, top to bottom, with top 125 pounders to 100 top 45 pounders. Same thing with Strikeforce. I miss it. Yeah, me too. Strikeforce in a way. I miss that too. You would see first you have Strikeforce, the Challenger show, and then you would get the big-time Strikeforce pay-per-view. So you see Robbie Lawler. You would see, Jake Shields. You would see the heavyweight tournament. You would see, okay, the women are this month. And you would just create that excitement where it's every couple of months instead of, Bellator, where it's every week. And you don't really get, it's hard on a Friday night, man. We're doing stuff. We're in that 18 to 34 range. We're not old fogies yet, even though we're approaching our 30s. We do stuff on Friday nights. It's difficult to sit down on a Friday night when you got girlfriends, or you got friends, or you just want to go out and have a beer after a hard week's of work. I don't know if you really want to watch Bellator on a Friday night. It's difficult.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's just a really odd time, an event or a day to be having that type of event, and they're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. The weekday kind of belongs to, especially during football season, it belongs to college football.
It does.
It belongs to the NBA. It's just Bellator's in a really difficult spot when you're competing against a promotion within your own sport that's better, meaning the UFC, and two, a sport in boxing that has been implemented in this culture for the past 140 years, man.
Yeah, it's difficult. One last event to discuss, Juan Manuel Marquez, I said it right this time, against Mike Alvarado, taking this fight to World Championship Boxing on HBO, won't be on pay-per-view. Rumors that the winner will fight Manny Pacquiao later this year. Do we really want to see another fight with Marquez and Pacquiao again? There is some storyline with Pacquiao getting knocked out, but it'll be the fifth time that they have fought, right? If Marquez wins.
Correct.
So, I think people kind of want to see it. It would be the first time it'd be Pacquiao avenging his brutal knockout loss. Is that insane to say? Is that insane to really say that? Or do you think, okay, it's just 5 times, it's too much for these guys to keep killing each other, even though the 75% of the fights have been classics?
Yeah, no, I think it's just too much. You want to see new blood in there just because if Mike Alvarado were to pull this victory off, that might also be a very entertaining fight with Manny Pacquiao. So
agreed. Yeah,
it's it's a damn. Either way, I think the next fight is going to be a decent one. I do not want to see a fifth Pacquiao Marquez. Will I watch it? Probably, just because I've been suckered into the other ones, and as you mentioned, most of them have been very entertaining. Anytime you use the word "most" to describe a battle between two fighters, that just goes to show how dead that promoter is with talent in that weight division. It's
true.
But nonetheless, is this fight here? It's taking place at the Forum in Inglewood, man. Forum is something that hasn't been part of the sports vocabulary in, I'd say, a good 15 years, man. I think the Lakers used to play there for a while, and Juan Manuel Marquez actually started his career there. So it's kind of like not necessarily a homecoming, but it kind of is with regards to his living every day in the sport for Juan Manuel Marquez to return to the Forum. And Mike Alvarado, obviously, most of the pressure, I think, is on Alvarado. Marquez is already established, and if Alvarado loses a loss here, a consecutive loss for either guy will be detrimental, but I think it'll hurt Mike Alvarado's career a lot more. Because let's not get it wrong. We know Juan Manuel Marquez is already 40 years old. Mike Alvarado is already 33. A lot of people don't realize that. So this could be the tail end of Mike Alvarado's career already, and a loss would tremendously hurt him. Of course, if it's a very exciting fight, it'll be a benefit for Alvarado to get his name out there. But Alvarado has to win this fight. the odds are actually pretty close. It's basically almost a coin flip with Juan Manuel Marquez being slightly a favorite. I think Marquez can ultimately win a decision, but you know what, Jay? It's rare for me to go against Juan Manuel Marquez, but I think I'm going to go Mike Alvarado because I have a feeling he's just going to be a lot busier in this fight, and he needs this victory a whole lot more.
He does, and he really needs a marquee victory, even if it's against a 40-year-old Marquez. I think he needs that as his resume to be kind of legit, not only against facing Pacquiao, but as other contenders in that division for the foreseeable future. And him losing this fight, I think, would dramatically derail him. Even if it's a fight of the year candidate, I think the best case scenario in the loss is that he gets a rematch with Marquez if the fight's close and if it's exciting. So we'll have to wait and see there. That's going to wrap up our show, man. Anything else you wanted to add before we say goodbye this week on a special Wednesday edition?
I just felt bad going against Juan Manuel Marquez, man. I think the only time I've ever done that is when he fought Floyd Mayweather. It's just weird to say it, but I think he's at the tail end of his career, and Timothy Bradley exploited him. But nonetheless, I'm still excited to see that fight. You never know; both guys love to bang, so if that's what happens, you might be in for one hell of a night with those two dudes.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun fight weekend. There's just shows every weekend here for the foreseeable future. So, summer's heating up and so are the fights. So looking forward to see them. As always, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. You can follow us on Twitter through @TheLowBlow. We're available through YouTube, youtube.com/LowBlow505. We're available on Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatic. And of course, we're thankful to our partners, Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and MyMMANews.com. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. We will see you next time. Enjoy the fights this weekend. See you later.
Peace.